Hello, hello, good morning, afternoon or evening, whenever you are watching, and welcome back to the channel. It has been a hot second since our last video, but it's okay. New season, new me, and a new highly powered computer to deal with all this footage. So hopefully that will help with more regularly scheduled content. As the title of this video suggests, we are talking about all of the books that I have read over summer, which is June, July and August. There are 28 books to cover, so let's just dive right in. It's actually just be real time. Okay, some of these books I'm just going to kind of mention and breeze past, and others I'm going to spend longer on. But as always, if there is a book that you specifically want to know about, you can always drop a comment, or you can find me over on Kate's Literature on Insta. June started off strong with a re-listen of the second Thursday Murder Club, which is called The Man Who Died Twice. I listened to the first two because I was getting ready to read the third one, and to be honest, I couldn't really remember what had happened in the first two. Since then, I have read 27 other books, and to be honest, I can't really remember much about it now. I really enjoyed it at the time, and I love how Richard Osman kind of writes characters, but I think the cozy mystery element just doesn't give enough drama for me, and so I think ultimately these are never going to be my favourite books, but enjoyable. Next up was a reread of Beach Read by Emily Henry. I enjoyed this book just as much the second time as I did when I read it kind of May time last year. If you haven't read any Emily Henry and you enjoy reading romance, I would definitely recommend it. I would recommend Beach Read first, and then I would recommend Happy Place. I really love those two books of hers. After that, I would rank probably People We Meet on Vacation and Book Lovers at the bottom. Not my favourite, but we stan Emily Henry. This, like the first time, was a 4 stars for me. Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan was my first audiobook of the month. Julia Whelan is one of the most prolific audiobook narrators out there, and so I was really excited to listen to one of her own written books, which she narrates. She has narrated for Taylor Jenkins Reid books, for Emily Henry books, and for literally hundreds of others. For me, listening to audiobooks, the narrator makes a massive difference, and so if you're on the fence, can highly recommend her books. The story follows our female main character Swanee, who is herself an audiobook narrator but who has taken a bit of a career break, and she gets enticed back into one last narration for one of her favourite authors, and it is co-narrated with like world's sexiest man, world's sexiest voice, this guy called Brock McKnight, who kind of the audiobook world is obsessed with. Will she or won't she partner with him to make one last audiobook, and yeah, kind of all the twists and turns that come with that. I really enjoyed it. Some of it is kind of your classic predictable romance, some of it I didn't see coming, and so I actually really enjoyed it. Overall, this was an easy 4 stars for me. My first 5 stars of the summer was The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. I feel like I'd seen this book everywhere, and I managed to find it in the 3 for £6 deal in the works, and so obviously I just had to have it. I totally devoured through this book. It is a mystery thriller. It follows our main character Millie, who takes up this job as a live-in housemaid and nanny to this rich family. But definitely all is not as it seems, and there's kind of loads of twists and turns. Some of it you see coming, some of it you don't, and it just totally had me hooked. I read it in like a day, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I love that kind of thrill of a mystery thriller where you're kind of just racing to see what happens next. I've yet to pick up the sequel, The Housemaid's Secret, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I actually will. It is on Kindle Unlimited, which I do have at the minute, so maybe, but it's just not at the top of my list. Next up was another audiobook, which was The Guest List by Lucy Foley. Originally, I rated this book 4.5 stars, but when I went back to kind of create the list for this video, I just couldn't really, again, remember much about it. I feel like I enjoyed listening to it at the time, and I remember some of the twists and turns, but for me, I just don't think it was 4.5 worthy, and I think the fact that I can't remember loads probably means that it's more like a 3-star. I definitely didn't see some of the plot twists coming, and so I definitely thought it was clever, but overall I think the characters were just so annoying that like I just couldn't root for any of them, and I just wasn't really upset at the bad things that happened. Next up is the 6th Harry Potter book, The Half-Blood Prince, and later in July I also listened to the 7th and final book. I do a yearly listen to all 7 Harry Potters. I love the Stephen Fry narration, and so for me it's kind of just a comfort re-listen every year that I just really enjoy, and there's not much else to say other than that. Nora Goes Off Script was the next up for June. Again, I listened to this one. June had loads of audiobooks for me. This book follows Nora, who is a screenwriter who essentially writes a script based on her life after her husband leaves her, and it gets picked up and turned into a movie, and they actually film the movie in her home. So we kind of see how her and her family are dealing with that. It's still kind of fresh, and suddenly there's a TV crew, and there's like this super hot guy who is meant to be playing her ex, and he's in her house, and yeah, you'll have to just give it a read to see how that plays out. But overall, I really did like it. I thought it was just, again, a nice, easy romance, classic 3 stars for me. The Chemistry of Love was next up that I read on my Kindle. This was originally a Prime first reads that I got on Kindle. I think it was back in like January or February. Obviously I didn't read it until June, and I read it as I was travelling from Belfast to London to Sierra Leone for a trip that I took there. This was just like an easy travel read. It was nice, flew through it on Kindle. It was a little bit predictable. I think the plot kind of wanted to be maybe Ali Hazelwood, woman in STEM, finding love. I haven't actually read any Ali Hazelwood, so maybe I'm totally off base. But I think, again, it was just fine. Maybe I just read loads of fine books, or maybe my standards have just got a lot harsher over the last year. But for first reads, it was fun. I know it's publicly available now, but it just, yeah, kind of was what it was. The last read of June was the final, I say final, more are coming. The 3rd installment in the Thursday Murder Club, which was The Bullet That Missed. I started reading this on physical, and then I ended up finishing listening to it because I didn't want to bring the physical to Africa. And so listening made sense. I like this book, but again, like I kind of mentioned with Richard Osman, I feel like the cozy mystery vibe, I really enjoy when I'm reading, but it just doesn't stick with me. Will I pick up the more? I'm actually not sure yet. Probably my husband and I both read them. He read this one first and kind of was like, yeah, it's not my favourite, which definitely put me off, but I'm glad I read it. I think I'm just so invested in the Murder Club family. Yeah, just these 4 characters that have been built over this series. I think they're all so robust that any of them can kind of take the spotlight, and the books could be about any of them and it would be a good time. And I think Richard Osman has done a really great job of bringing together 4 people that would never have interacted under different circumstances, and I think that is an amazing quality to be able to write into a book. Moving into July. I feel like I kicked off July with a huge bang. I had 2 brilliant books to start the month, which were Daisy Jones and the Six and Daisy Hates the Great Undoing. Kicking off with Daisy Jones and the Six, this was a re-listen. I first read this book in like November 2021, I think, kind of just before TJR had her first big hype. This book kind of brought me out of a pretty major reading slump that I was in, but I also read it when James and I were on a mini break and my mental health wasn't in a great space, and so I just associate really good vibes with this book because of that break and our quality time and getting out of the reading slump and everything. So maybe I hold it a little bit higher than other people, but I really do love it, and now I have even more great memories associated with it, with listening to it in Africa and all of the amazing memories that were created there. And Daisy Hates the Great Undoing, moment of appreciation for this entire series. This book, I actually recently just got the physicals, and I actually nearly cried when I opened them because I just love this series so much. Do I think that anyone should ever base their romantic life based off any of these characters that Jessie Hastings writes? No. Do I think that they are just the most gut-wrenching books with characters that feel somehow so far off but so relatable? Yes. I just love them. Dizzy Hits the Great Undoing is the second Dizzy Hits book. It is the fourth in the overall Magnolia Parks universe series and is the most recent book that Jessie Hastings has released. I'm obsessed. I don't know what else to say about this series. If you haven't read it but you've heard mixed reviews, I would really just recommend trying it. I know some people love it and some people hate it, and that's why I originally read it on Kindle. But if you hate it, so what? If you DNF the first book and you're like, this series isn't for me, that's fine. But if you read it and you love it, you've been blessed. Highly recommend. And the fact that the first 4 books are still on Kindle Unlimited is an absolute steal. So go, go, go. Next up is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams, which is the second in the When in Rome series. And I think you can kind of read these as standalones, but I definitely recommend reading When in Rome first. So this book follows Will, who is Amelia's bodyguard, and Annie, who is Noah's sister. And Annie is kind of shy, she doesn't really date, but she wants to get out there more. And so Will ends up offering to kind of like fake date her to teach her how to date. You can guess what happens next. But overall, I really like Sarah Adams' books. I think they're just such a great read. Up until now, they have all been closed door, but I know that she is transitioning into more open door in the future. I think everything she writes is great and will continue to be great. The cheat sheet holds a special place in my heart. It's just so wholesome. If you love wholesome books, Sarah Adams is the girl for you. And if you like spicier books too, I guess they're coming your way. Next up is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and this may be slightly controversial, but I didn't love it. And I'm actually comforted at the fact that I've had quite a few friends say the same thing recently. I don't know if it's just the fact that it took me about 4 months to get through this book, or that I flicked back and forth between reading and listening, but I just felt like it tried to do so much that I think for me it just kind of didn't hit anywhere. I know some people adored this book, highly rated it, but for me it just wasn't the one. And before I antagonise an entire fan base, I'll just leave it there. One book that was for me, however, was Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld, I think is how you pronounce their name. This book is basically about a late night TV show, basically like SNL, and our main character Sally, who is one of the writers, and she kind of has this theory that funny men who aren't super attractive end up with really attractive partners, but that is just not the same for funny women. And she kind of holds this chip on her shoulder, and it kind of becomes true over and over and over again as she is continually single, until she meets someone. The one thing I will say about this book is that if you don't like COVID timelines or you don't like overly political books, I would probably recommend that you avoid this. For me, it didn't bother me. I was able to kind of just compartmentalize it as the book, even though, you know, we've all got COVID trauma. But overall, I really like this book. I think regardless of kind of the more controversial sides of it, I think the plot was really funny and actually asked some really good questions around how we engage with men and women, and what is deemed as attractive. I really enjoyed this book, and so it was 4 stars for me. Across July and August I read a couple of series, and the first of that was the first set of the Moral Instrument series. I listened to the first 2 and I'm currently listening to the third. And I honestly don't know what to say about these books. I think maybe because I'm still in the series, I don't have like firm opinions, but I think these are books that I've always wanted to get to, but I just feel a bit confused about at the minute. Maybe by the end of the third, I'll just be totally invested and want to continue. But what I had imagined before I went in was that I was just going to devour every book, every plot, every set of characters, and just race through all of Cassandra Clare's literary collection, but that is just not really what's happened. And so I don't know how I feel about them yet. I think I feel confused. I think they feel like a meme sometimes. And I think I have no other words right now. But one series I did finish just in time for the third book to come out in September was the first two in the Knock 'Em Out series, which are Things We Never Got Over and Things We Hide from the Light. The first thing I will say is that these books are deceptively long. I read them both on Kindle, and I didn't realise until I went into a shop and saw them that they are both well over 500 pages. And I think especially in the second one, there's kind of a big chunk in the middle-ish that you could get rid of and probably wouldn't affect the plot or really how much you like the characters. I think that there's enough world building in the first book to carry through well into the second book, and enough in what's left of the second book, if you took a chunk out, that you still have robust characters and plot. The first two are kind of about two brothers who live in this small town called Knock 'Em Out, and kind of the small town romance and trouble that they come into. I will definitely read the third book in the series. How quickly I will get to it is a great question though, but it has definitely kind of ignited the fire in me for a bit of a small town romance and even into cowboy romance. My last book of July was A Court of Silver Flames. I read the first 3 books of the series kind of last winter time, and I really enjoyed them, but then it took me like 4 attempts to get into Silver Flames. And I think, to be honest, it's just because I couldn't get past how sexual it was. It wasn't until kind of a good friend was like, no, I promise there's more past it. It's just a lot at the start. It is a lot at the start, middle and end, I will say. It was fine. Love it or hate it. People love it, people hate it. It just felt like a lot. And that was all I will say, because I feel like I've angered too many people already. Okay, home stretch. We're into August, 2/3 of the way through. Starting strong this month in August, I read the first 4 books of the Chestnut Springs series. The first 3 I read physically, and then the 4th one I read on Kindle Unlimited. And they're just so cute. I accept what I just said about very sexual Silver Flame definitely applies in Chestnut Springs too. Do not be fooled by the cutesy covers and the idea of a cutie cowboy small town romance. These books have a lot of sexually explicit content, and more than once I laughed at how cringe it felt. I think it is just not for me. That kind of like very crude sexual language, not for me. But do I love the characters that Elsie Silver has built and this kind of whole world of Chestnut Springs? Yes. Do I think that all 4 books are just kind of a repeat of the same thing? Yes. Am I mad about it? No. I will read probably every book that she puts out in that series, and I don't care if it's the same plot over and over again. She has me. It basically centres around this family called the Eaton family, and they have loads of sons and daughters and cousins and friends who obviously all need romantic partners, so there's lots of books to be written. But overall, they're just really fun, and I love how kind of they're all friends, and you see people in the following books, and you see how the other romances play out, and it's just a good time all around. Highly recommend. And in the middle of reading the Chestnut Springs series, I listened to Fourth Wing on audio, which was maybe a bad idea, but I did it. I feel like this book was so highly screamed about by so many people, and it actually wasn't until I went on to Goodreads to look at this book that I realised how many bad reviews it has. I feel like I'd only seen good things up until now, and I think I'd probably fall somewhere in the middle. This book basically follows our main character, Violet, who basically as a late teenager, kind of instead of going to university, you go to a quadrant. So her whole life she thought she was going to be in the scribe quadrant, which is like the nerds. But she ends up going to the writer's quadrant, which is basically she learns how to have a dragon and control and train, and she will become one of the fighters to like protect the realm. And basically the two outcomes in the Riders quadrant are you graduate or you die. And we basically see Violet as she has a lot of hurdles to overcome being in this new world of a rider when she thought she was going to be a scribe, and kind of the challenges but also blessings that has, and as she interacts with people that love her and hate her and everything in between, and just tries to make it through and graduate. I know that there is a second book coming out very soon, and so I'll probably pick it up, but I don't think I'll be racing to get to the front of the queue. Overall, I think it was like a 3.5 for me. Okay, 3 to go. Next up was Beach Rivals by Georgie Tilney. It is kind of a girl who moves to Bali to take up this position in a bookshop for 3 months over summer, and she works there and she thinks that it's just going to be something to do for the summer, but she doesn't realise that she's job sharing and flat sharing with this broody American Jack. And of course we see some tension, slow burn, and as we see them interacting, getting to know each other, fighting a lot, but of course you need a spark for a flame. And we find Claire kind of finding herself in Bali, deciding what she wants to do with her life. Similar to most romances, this was a fun, easy 3 stars for me. We're going high and low for the last 2. We're starting with low. I actually can't even bear to talk about this book. I feel embarrassed and ashamed to have had it on my read list, but I'm going to talk about it, and it is the very first book in the Addicted Calloway series. I trusted Rachel Catherine too much, and I pushed through when I should have just DNF'd it. This book is basically about, this is so cringe to even talk about it. This book follows Lily and Lauren, who are best friends, a fake couple, and he is addicted to alcohol and she is addicted to sex, and they basically cover for each other. It's awful. I wish that I could get the like 8 hours of my life that I spent on that book back. I wish I'd just DNF'd it. I trusted Rachel Catherine too much, and if she ever sees this, I want an apology. Maybe it's my own fault. That's all I'm going to say on that. I give it 0.5 stars. Wish I DNF'd it. Got a refund from Audible. Thank you. Thankfully, it is upwards to the last book of the summer, which was One of Us Is Back by Karen M. Mannis, and this is the 3rd and final installment in the One of Us Is Lying trilogy. I feel like I just love a good YA mystery thriller, and this book just hit where I wanted it to. The weather has already started to turn here in Northern Ireland, and so it was the perfect kind of ease into more of the autumnal vibes. We see the original cast of The Baby 4, plus all of the new characters brought in the rest of the series, and some brand new ones for this book, as we follow kind of the tail end of what started with Simon's original prank plot that ultimately gets him killed in the first book. And we see Addie, Nate, Cooper and Bronwyn kind of for the final time. It wraps up really well. It just made me love them even more, and I think it just ties up the series. Lots of loose ends, lots of answered questions, and lots of drama. It was an easy 4 stars for me, and I just again super raced through it. I'm gonna miss not having another book in that series. Well, like I said, the weather has already turned for the worse here in Northern Ireland, and so I am ready to get into some more autumnal vibes and definitely some more fantasy books. I'm such a mood reader, and so the summer was all about romance, and now I'm ready to hit the fantasy. I have quite a few books that I have started and not finished that are fantasy vibes, and so hopefully over the next couple of months you will see me finish those and talk about them more. I hope this video has been inspiration for your TBR, or just fun watching, or maybe some advice on what to avoid. But for now, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.